Hello and welcome back to another episode of the preview show. Now we are back after a little break, I guess technically, in the calendar. We skipped Gamers 8 because it was at weird times, with weird teams and a weird format, so I didn't really understand what we'd do with it. I thought better to have just a couple weeks off, regroup, potentially put out a video. I would have, but I didn't. I'm not going to tell you why, but it would have been nice to have gotten a video out.
You need to justify that's your channel.
True, it is my channel. I'm the king here. Screw you guys. Oh, I'm joking. It would have been nice to get a video out, but life got in the way. One of those things where summer with work gets absolutely ridiculous. Everyone decides they're going to go on holiday with their kids. I mean, the audacity of these people to have families. So I end up covering for all of them. And here we are. A few weeks later, refreshed, sweaty, and talking about some Counter-Strike. I Am Cologne happened, just to quickly recap. We did just a playoff preview. We kept it light, kept it easy breezy. I, of course, picked up the maximum points of 2 with my pick of G2. Vitality not making it to the final, not giving me any extra little bonuses. Of course, Yumi, your pick did make the final, get an extra point for you, keeping you in contention on the scoreboard. I mean, there's not much to call right now. And the fans not getting any points was perfect. I don't get what happened with the vote. You guys picked, like, really 4 different teams got 20+%. None of them were good picks, in my opinion. So keep it up. I'm loving the energy. Just keep that coming. I'm going to keep climbing back, and by the end of it, I'm going to keep my money. That's something I'm in dire need of. But yeah, now we're all caught up. Yumi, how you doing? Glad to see you again.
Yeah, no, happy to be back, and yeah, just been kind of enjoying a bit of a break. I mean, some casting kind of on and off, but really just been recovering from just even the player break, because I messed up my sleep schedule terribly, and then have been busy enough that I haven't been able to fix it. So
fair enough. Yeah, no. For
aside from that, alive.
Yeah, alive, right? And I'm glad, actually, I've managed to avoid breaking my sleep schedule. Baldur's Gate 3 came out. I want to spend every waking second playing it. That's not why I didn't upload that video. Anyone who's thinking that, I definitely have been wasting all my time playing Baldur's Gate 3. Now that convincing argument's out of the way. Yeah, I'm glad I haven't. Like, usually when a new game comes out that I actually enjoy, I'm up till 3 AM, but managed to avoid it. We're good, we're clean. I still sleeping a good 6-8 hours.
See, I actually want to play that game a lot, but I basically don't have the attention span to play it solo and play 4 different characters. So
that's the dream. Oh, that's the Dungeons and Dragons dream. You get to control all your friends.
I just like worrying about what I'm doing. I played Divinity 2, and you just did whatever you wanted by yourself.
That's fair. But no, I actually have friends as well, so I've been able to play it co-op. I've been able to play it. It's been a whale of a time.
Nice.
Let's get back on track. It's a bit focused. Enough about Baldur's Gate 3. Excellent game. Maybe not worth 50 quid. Anyway. We are talking, of course, about ESL Pro League. It's a massive event with 4 groups, and we're going to cover just A and B in this first episode. But let's be honest, we've got a few issues, because we looked at the groups, and we struggled. Because usually we do 2 favourites, 2 underdogs per group. You know, it's 8 teams a group. But can you find me 4 teams worthy of being a favourite in either group? No, not really. So we've decided to do 3 combined favourites across A and B each, just to try and make it a little more interesting, so we're not talking about how we think totally. NIP favourites. Oh yeah, they're going to go deep. Furia, I did pick them. Spoilers. But at the same time, it's kind of desperation. We really run out of good teams. This group feels so weak. I'm not really sure what else to say about it. Yumi, how do we solve these sorts of problems?
Yeah, I don't know. I think, you know, ESL Pro League is a nice sort of vacuum event where, you know, it kind of culminates with a bunch of other qualifying tournaments, whether that's like the ESL Challenger standoff events or the Challenger League, for example. Like, it's a good opportunity for budding teams to come in, but it does also skew these groups a bit where, like, solid tier 1 teams are in there, sure, but some of them aren't even in the best of form, which also makes it a bit of a harder argument to make. In terms of making them a favorite. But then also these teams that basically are just looking for more experience. You know, I hate saying they're happy to be there, but they effectively have no expectation coming into an event like this. You know, it's just a nice excuse to intermingle with other players, get good practice in, and especially for people in Asia and Australia, maybe even the South American teams as well, when they get a chance to come over. Like, this is just a lovely sort of boot camping opportunity, really.
100%, yes. For a team like, let's say, let's pluck an example out of the air that's not going to be in this video. Rooster. Realistically, if they win a map, they should pop the champagne, bring out the red panties, all that crap. Like, they should be celebrating like they've won a title. That's a huge deal for them. They're not on this sort of level. I mean, these issues we talk about where we got teams that aren't that competitive qualifying, they're compounded also by the fact that just the challenger system below still has these antiquated, like, basically grandfathered in sort of qualifiers where being the best team in Poland gets you a free slot, whilst being the second best team in Denmark gets you nothing. That was the example. Like, there's certain regional qualifiers that still apply, like Iberian ones go straight through specific countries as well. It's just a bit odd. I'm not a big fan of it, but I don't get to run ESL, so I can't make those changes. Here we are. The field looks a bit weak. Let's start with your first pick, though, with a favourite, a team that shouldn't be weak. Who have you gone with?
So I'm going to start straight away in Group B, and I've chosen ENCE, the back-to-back finalists for not only IEM Cologne, but also the single elimination Gamers 8 tournament, where they took and had to beat some pretty tough teams to even get into that position. For Cologne, they beat, 9, Fnatic, Heroic, and Vitality before losing to G2 in the final. And then for Gamers 8, Liquid, who I think people are have okay expectations of, a new Cloud9 that's, fresh and has a lot of potential, and also beating Heroic without dropping a map, and then they lose to Vitality in the final. So
yeah,
I've chosen ENCE here. They've, I think, solidified a great position. I'm really up on Snappy as an in-game leader. I think as well, Sampaius is reaching actual superstar levels with his AWP, where previously, coming into this ENCE roster, I think expectations were set very high given the peak we saw before he joined ENCE. But him actually getting that kind of result against top-level teams didn't seem like it was that transferable. Now I'm starting to believe, like, this Sampaius, with the way that he is, and you having players like Nertz alongside him, like Martin or Diha, I think this team just has so many good soldier pieces, but enough star potential that they are, I'd argue, the most consistent team at the moment in the circuit.
Yeah, they have a very solid argument to be the actual number 2 team in the world right now. They're ranked number 3 just behind Heroic, who of course have received credit for their extended consistency over the course of the last 12 months. But yeah, this ENCE team is legit. They've beaten Heroic twice now. That's the foundation of that argument. Then you look at the individuals, as you mentioned. Yes, Sampaius at Gamers 8 cracked the Grail, the 1.2 rating. Like, he actually started to play at that sort of level that we expect from the great AWPers. The guys who have been consistently at the top of the rankings for a few years now. So that's really impressive from him. As you said, Nertz alongside has been phenomenal. I still think back to the times when he managed to drag that endpoint roster to that Pro League. It's 15 or something like that. And then just proceeds to completely shit on opponents. Like, be the single shining light on that roster that otherwise, as a team, didn't perform. But he himself really pulled them into relevance. To see him on ENCE show that was not some fluke. He wasn't just, the star rifler who gets everything set up for him and then obviously gets the numbers. No, he was a legit fragger at this level. And that's been awesome. I've always been a fan of their, as you put them, soldier players, Diha and Martin. I think their talent goes under the radar because of the things they're willing to do for their IGL and do for their team. So yeah, love ENCE as a pick, just as a team. I've always been up on Snappy personally, so for me that's not been a discovery. It's just glad to see him up there, finally winning some titles, getting some top finishes, and a whole lot of prize money for the only org worth supporting in the scene.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was that I remember being really iffy on Snappy for his mid-rounding, and I remember in our discussion before for Cologne, that was the one thing I thought had developed the most coming into this year with the addition of players like him. So, that's where Snappy right now is actually in the conversation as just kind of being one of the best, I mean, probably the best in-game leader we have right now. I'm not going to say in the circuit entirely, because I think he's just in really good calling form.
Sure, yeah, I can see an argument for that. It's hard to debate and put him above the guys who have been really good for a while now. Guys like Cadian, guys like Carrigan. Some people would say Apex as well. I just think with that roster, how can you lose? But no, yeah, I think Snappy deserves a lot of credit for this. I think the way he's managed to keep his sort of iconic style of the explosive executes, whilst also yeah, at times making better mid-round calls, allowing players like Nertz to flourish, who don't necessarily get as much of their impact and their work done in those sorts of set rounds. Yeah, it's been really impressive, and honestly, hopefully more success to them. Except in this event, because I didn't pick them. So, my first pick, my top favourite, of course, I went with the big French guns. Vitality, yes, they still count as French, clinging desperately to that idea, because they have 2 French players. It's a bit weird. Vitality, they've won the major. And coming out of that, I thought, this is the time to establish something dominant. You've got the most loaded roster, arguably, in the world. Even though some other teams have put some pretty good things together, you should have the most loaded roster now that you've upgraded to Flames as well coming out of that. I'm expecting big things. And yeah, they won Gamers 8. They didn't win Cologne. I think this event is another event where they should keep that up. And look, we're technically doing a group stage prediction, so smashing this group isn't the conversation. I think for Vitality, we have to talk about deeper runs, and we have to talk about what we can expect from their roster. I think FlameZ somehow was an underrated upgrade. It feels weird to say that, because he came in, and I saw a lot of people saying, well, we didn't see that much explosiveness. Like, when it was on OG, we didn't actually see all this great extra, like, impactful work that we want from Dupree, but got on that one Vertigo map ever, and that's it. It somehow was a bit of an underrated upgrade at the time, even though it should have. Everyone should have looked and seen it slots right in, does the same roles, does it way better. It's just going to work. It felt like it didn't get that sort of applause, that acclaim.
Yeah, I think the main thing that people counter-argued for Flamesy in this roster was that it was just a risk. You know, the fact that Dupree was such a long-standing player within the circuit, had attended every major, has won the most majors. It also, you know, seemed to be a pretty talismanic kind of entity for the teams that he'd been on. You know, whether that was Astralis or even on this Vitality roster, you know, Dupree's a very sort of bubbly personality, and so people like to cling to things like that. I do think that a lot of the backlash to the move actually probably stemmed just from, you know, parasocial relationships with fans, because they're thinking, we know Dupree way more than we know Flames or Flamesy, and even if we're just, this is totally stuff outside of the server, you know, it's nothing to do with how they actually perform in game. I don't think this is a conversation that we had. You know, I think we always agreed that Flames was an upgrade over Dupree, because there was a really rough period where Dupree just, like, you couldn't tell what spots he was going to play because they were constantly shifting him around the map. It just makes sense, and I do back this Vitality pick, just simply because, I mean, they've got Zywoo, they've got Flames, they've got Magus. I mean, they've got so many. They've actually just got such a heavy hitting roster. Even if calling sometimes breaks down, I think that's something I still notice with Vitality. Calling does sometimes break down, but these guys are they're not only just stars, they're actually just big game players as well.
Yeah, they've kind of, well, for the most part, Magus came in as that. Zywoo, there were doubts about it. There still are some people arguing about whether or not he is or he isn't. That's not a conversation I really want to entertain. But guys like, Spinks kind of had to prove it, you know. He didn't come in battle-tested. Flamesy didn't come in battle-tested. But hell, if this is the standard we expect, where you just look at the HLTV fantasy picks for this upcoming Pro League, 4 of them are gold picks. Like, they've just had that level of performance as a team. It's not necessarily an indication of individuals being that good. They're not all, like, top 10 to 15 players in the world, although they will end up so on the HLTV list. They're just clicking so much as a team. Everything fits in, and they are all actually good. Not great, good. This is just what happens. So I'm thinking Vitality should expect to win this event, as they should every event they enter. Actually, coming out of this group, I'm sorry. If they don't, it's on par with, you know, G2 not making out the RMRs. Except this is an even easier format to min-max, so pretty comfortable in that pick.
Yeah, I think so. Which does bring me to not even thinking about winning the tournament, really, but we're thinking about groups. We're only talking about groups. And so Heroic are my second pick out of Group B. I've decided to stick with Group B here because I looked at ENCE on one side of the bracket, I looked at ENCE or Heroic on the other side, and I thought, well, they have what, 3 lives in the ESL Pro League groups? So there's like a lower bracket, and then there's a lower bracket.
There's a last chance stage,
Yeah, so they'll make it through. I think as much as Heroic have, I think, had a conversation thrown around them about whether or not they are that consistent team that I think we're harping on them for the first half of the year. I think a lot of that does actually fall, unfortunately, to the man that came under the most scrutiny on this roster as of late, and that's Yabi. Because this guy has some incredible peaks. When he is peaking, the rest of the squad just look like they don't have to do that much. You know, Stown has a much easier job. Shush is usually, I think it's like a combination of when Yabi does well, Shush does much better, and Stown does much better as well. But then when Yabi goes missing, then suddenly you need Tessus to be that guy. And it's just, I get that this roster is well-rounded enough that they're probably okay internally to have events like this. But I think Yabi was supposed to be the solution and not another one of these faceted, oh, we'll just see how he turns up in this tournament kind of players. Because that's the reason that they would have got and replaced it was Refresh for Yabi all that time ago. That Refresh was kind of the same thing. Like, he would have some good tournaments and then he'd have some bad tournaments. So what is the upside to Yabi if not to be another star on this roster? At the moment, he is kind of struggling.
Well, I'd say this quite simply. He is an upgrade to Refresh because Yabi's off tournaments are essentially what Refresh gave you on average. That's the problem. You've gone from a far lower floor to a also higher peak. Like, you've upgraded every single part of that. Like, yes, it'd be nice if you could consistently rely on just Yabi being the second starter Stown, alongside sort of Cadian as the AWPer, and then Tessus and Shush don't have to be as impactful. But I think it's kind of the way they've built their system, it has to be able to accommodate for it. And I think Yabi and Tessus is the real focus. Those are the two. I wouldn't say it's like a one-man thing. I think you have to figure out the balance between getting these two players activated. If trying to just have Yabi be the main impact guy who does the other extremity stuff isn't working consistently, I think you have to start looking at a system that maybe groups 3 players together. Like a controversial idea.
I think the problem that I have is that, when you look at them set Yabi up with a flash, for example, they'll have maybe 6, maybe 8 rounds where Yabi will be sent in and will be given a chance to find a critical kill for the round. In his dip in form recently, it's not like he's not being given those chances with the same opportunities. He's just simply missing them. And unfortunately, as much as they're willing to adapt and they change people around if they feel like, oh, well, he's just not having a great game, we'll swap in Stown or we'll put Tessus in that same spot. You still have to have that adaptation period, that leeway, where you might set him up 6 times and he might fail all 6 times. But now you're coming up with that solution to change those people around 6 rounds too late. That's my problem I have with it, where I don't know what's happened. If this is just the effect of the player break, for example, as kind of an interrupting period. But yeah, I just want to see more out of him. I'm not down on this whole Heroics squad because I think they have enough to comfortably make it out of groups, maybe even probably make top 5, top 6. I just think that winning Pro League is out of reach at the moment.
It's one of those arguments where many people have said this, and there is some credence to it, that this team doesn't have a superstar. Like, Starvin is supposed to be the main guy, but even he doesn't feel... He's not on the level of an Eco, an Axile, even a Frozen, I want to say, at times. He's just not that impactful on winning games, so you do have to rely on more guys to produce more than most teams are used to. I think the solution is just balancing out that sort of weight across Tessus and Yabi more comfortably. So it's clearly, maybe it's too much for the kid. He's still 19, Yabi? Maybe he's turned 20 soon? Like, he's still very, very young. So I think maybe that's an idea to look at. But no, comfortably making it out of groups, no worries. As are my second favourite, because they've been weirdly really good, at least to me, and that's Astralis. Now, everyone was expecting them to get better, right? When you sign Device and you get rid of some of the deadweight, you expect a team to get better. But I thought they've looked really good. Like, Cologne's top 4 run was legit. I mean, if you look at the wins they got, sure, 2-0 against NIP, who hasn't, but then 2-0 MOUZ, who won Na'Vi, 2-0 Heroic. Yo, that's some real scalps, and that's a real performance. And this level of play from Device, it's above anything we ever saw on the all-time run version of Astralis. Now, sure, that team was kind of like Heroic, but with a few steroids, you know? It was the same sort of vibe, but turned up to 11. So he wasn't having to take all the openers and then also make all the repeaks and then also win the clutches. He was just being the textbook AWPer that he is so good at being. But this team having those two absolute monsters hyper-carrying and then basically a set of tools at BlameF's disposal is just working, and I'm loving it. It's kind of like... It does remind me of the initial Complexity days, back before Obo left, when it was peak BlameF and config. Like, can you imagine this roster if they still had, you know, Mr. Argy Bargy? It'd be actually... it'd be legitimately one of the most dangerous teams, but just with these two guys and the way they use their players to create favourable situations, favourable duels for their main stars, has been really impactful, and I think they'll make it through the groups easily. Deep runs, I think, are always going to be a challenge when you're expecting, I guess, so much grunt work from 3 players, and then your IGL to also win you the maps. It's a bit of a weird setup to go deep in tournaments, but it's clearly enough for a top 4 at Cologne. I think it will be enough for at least a comfortable group exit. Exit sounds wrong. Completion.
Yeah, attempt, run.
Yeah, a group stage run, maybe a single playoff victory. I think that's comfortably in the stars for them.
Yeah, no, See, I don't really like this Astralis roster simply because I don't think they'll ever win anything.
Yeah, that's fine.
And BlameF and Device, like you said, are kind of hyper carrying. But it's also a weird situation that this Astralis team are in, because a lot of teams in the circuit are looking for young players to then become superstars on their rosters.
Yep.
Whereas it feels like this is the one team that exists currently where that's not the case, and the young players are sort of brought in like, wow, you've got great potential. We love your vibe. Now I'm gonna bait you. Like that. Unfortunately, that's Device kind of use them to do. Like if Device is going to go for an aggressive peak, sometimes it'll be someone like Buzz or Stare actually peeking forward first, and you know he's supposed to be the space taker in that situation, and then he dies, and then Device kills him, and we move on with our lives. But yeah, Astralis they're a weird team for me. I don't disagree. Like in this group A, which, you know, out of the 2 groups that we have, I feel like A is weaker, even with the likes of NIP in there as well.
It's definitely weaker. It's grim.
Yeah, you've got Vitality as kind of that one team where you're like, oh, hey, you guys are looking great, and everybody else is a little bit shaky. So I think Astralis will be fine in this group.
I do want to throw this out as well. The whole hyper, like, explicit nature of these guys die, so these 2 MFers can get all the frags and win the rounds, has been proven to elevate teams. Like, this has worked before. I've got a great video about it. It's about Bird from Sky and the work he did with the Lyngby Vikings roster that became ecstatic. They had 3 players who existed only to die, so that Fasher and Wolfie could clean everyone up, and it worked. They got accused of cheating, that's how good Bird from Sky was at doing this. It's a great video. It's also just a really fascinating system. And I think they're just kind of doing like an accelerated version of that with actually great players, rather than Fasher and Wolfie. So I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Let them die. Repeatedly.
In theory as well, like, worst case scenario, they die, right? Best case scenario, they frag. You'll put Buzz in a spot where he's getting a first chance to shoot at somebody. Like, he could sometimes just kill and get. Yeah. No, I see.
It's a way more talented version.
I see the vision. I don't like it. I don't like what I'm looking at.
it's just it's kind of like there's Osgiliath, and the coach is Denethor. It's like, time for Stair to prove his quality. Take it back.
That's the reference. That's way over my head, bro.
They just have to go flying out, prove that they can actually do something. And if they win, bonus, they don't die. I mean, it's an absolute butchered reference. But I don't care. I've had Lord of the Rings on the brain for the last 3 days. But it's that idea of like, yeah, prove it. If you don't want to be just bait, go out first, hit the headshot. You won't. But Device will win the round anyway, so it's all good.
Yeah.
I love how just brutal it is. It's so...
Okay, I got you, little bro. Fine. Yeah, it's strange. They are strange. And talking about strange, talk about young players. One of the other teams I've picked as my favorites, I've stuck with Group B through and through. 3 favorites out of Group B. I decided I didn't want anything to do with Group A because anytime I even thought about it, you were taking them away as well. I have chosen MOUZ. Now, MOUZ are an interesting case because they did come second at IEM Dallas, where they beat Heroic twice in that tournament. That was the event that ENCE ended up winning. But they beat Astralis, OG, Furia, Fnatic as well in that event, only to lose to ENCE 2-0 in the finals. But I think the big conversation really is, in the same way that ENCE right now look like a very, very solid team because of some bias, I think Frozen is actually in career peak form right now. He is an incredibly high impact rifler for this team. If Frozen ever slumped, this team would just not be even relevant. I actually fully believe that, even with players like Xertion and the potential of somebody like Jimfat, and even with them bringing in Shui, I just simply think if Frozen wasn't in the form that he is now, this team actually wouldn't even be in consideration for. But he's just playing so well at the moment. Even the fights that look bad, he'll kill, and that's I think really what we were missing on even the older versions of MOUZ Sports. Frozen was still putting up some good numbers, but he wasn't finding the same type of impact that he is right now for this match. So, I mean, they're not a pick that I would conventionally go with. I feel like I've underestimated MOUZ so many times in the past year and a half. But to make it out of groups here, I like my chances. But
no, I mean, this is a group they should clean up well in. What's weird is you kept saying impact, and you're right. I was just thinking impact stats, because I know Frozen's impact stat, the number isn't that high. So I was looking up, does he even have a lot of clutches? It's like, no, he doesn't. He's just finding a great many frags. It's just as simple as that. His KPR's high, he's doing damage, he's doing everything you want from a rifler. It's just not appearing in the stats in the same way. It's traditionally a player with lower impact than his rating. Probably more on the clutch end of things, because impact really measures those opening frags, those initial multi-kills. He's just doing a little bit of everything, and just being very consistent, and you have to give him credit. Now, there is a slight coincidence, like it coincides with a peak form from, like, Torshi is actually putting up really good surface level numbers, but at the end of the day, the win conditions for this team really isn't Torshi. It's Frozen on a good day, Xertion.
Yeah.
But Torshi ain't going to be really winning the maps, unfortunately. I wish he was. I wish he delivered on the promise we saw in the NXT days, but he hasn't quite. An interesting one to talk about, though, is Jimfat. It's so strange to see him come through so soon, because he's still 16. And he was really polished for a low-level player. When I watched his demos, he featured on a Prospects like multi-episode, where I just did one demo for a bunch of players. He looked so polished and so advanced, so far above like an academy player or a tier 3, tier 2 sort of player. He looks like an almost finished product. It's just in this team, he's not getting the opportunities in the same way. Sure, he's still doing his job. Like, you can't really say he's doing the wrong thing. It's just we haven't seen anywhere close to his maximum potential. So perhaps if that Frozen to phase move that a lot of people rave about actually happens, or some other team decides, hey, maybe he's an upgrade, and they need someone to step up, I think you'll see a combination of Xertion and Jimfat do that. But for now, the roster feels so Frozen heavy. The deep runs Another team where you don't feel they can make a lot of them. But goddamn, if they don't smurf the hell out of this group. Even with the slightly stronger competition than Group A, they should be making it out pretty comfortably, right? I'm not going crazy when I say that.
Yeah, I mean, when they've got teams like Rooster, Monte, Evil Geniuses, MIBR contend with. Yeah, big as well in there. Hey, wait.
I know you're going to pick them.
Yeah, yeah. Just, I mean, I know, but listen, let me make my argument for that later.
But yeah, no, they should make it out. It's fair. They feel like a weak pick, but they really aren't, especially in this context. Like, they should be pretty easy making out. Now, speaking of weak picks, we go back to me and back to Group A. Now, there's this Brazilian roster. Once upon a time, they were quite a dominant roster. You know, they had a go-to pick in Vertigo. They had 2 of the best, probably 10 riflers in the world. Arguably one of the singularly best riflers in the world on his day. Explosive IGL who found ridiculous numbers of opening frags, great info. Orpas who could clean up the messes, and then occasionally a solid role player who would rotate like a revolving door, but at least solid. Now today, they technically still have a lot of the same players, but they look so bad, so egregiously bad in comparison to what they used to be. They've taken Fallen in to be their AWPing IGL, and not only does that a downgrade at the AWP, let's be real, Safe wasn't putting up world-breaking numbers, but he's not Fallen in 2023. He was far more solid than that. It also means we've taken Art off the IGL role, and the result has so far not been worth it. They haven't played a lot, but we've got a couple events under their belts, not a single good placement. Is this the event where it all comes together? Is this the event where the Brazilian copium that they've been huffing, mostly it's Fallen's farts, but it's to them it's copium, that Fallen will lead this team to greatness. Will that happen? Well, I've taken the massive risk that it actually will. K-Serato, he's due an event of like top tier prime K-Serato form. We know Yuri's still that guy. Art, now that he no longer has to think, can focus on clicking stuff. This has to be it. Cello feels like it could be an upgrade in the right hands, and those hands are the stable, comfortable, still with the meta hands of Fallen. He still knows what's going on. As he told us, he lost the meta a few years ago, but surely he's found it again. It's time for Fallen to prove this team can do it. This team can come back, make it out of a group stage. I know I'm asking for a lot, making out of groups. Like, you've been spending a lot of time in NA, but you guys can do it, I believe. Oh, I'm going to regret this pick so much.
Yeah, I'm. I don't even know how to really argue this point in a positive light. I always thought this Fallen move was massively overrated. I think we kind of had a little prelude to this episode where it was more about getting anybody on the in-game leader role aside from Art. That felt like what the community wanted, and they obliged. Fallen got the contract, and he was like, "Yep, I'm in. I can in-game lead K-Serato, Yuri. Hell yeah, I know what's going on."
How many zeros?
Yeah, just keep on drawing them on. I've got my own store. I've got a massive brand. Come on now. I mean, the thing is, anybody on Furia would have been excited to have Fallen because he's such like a big figure in the scene. I just don't think this Furia team just doesn't have an identity. Like, I think that's my problem with bringing in a different in-game leader and one like Fallen. It felt like it was his calling style was in an era where it was so default centric. I think Fallen himself even said, like, looking at Cloud9 on their come up, he saw a lot of what like the old Luminosity used to do on these maps, but refined to a better degree. That was even when Nafany was still on that team, by the way.
Yeah.
And we've seen that Cloud9 have not been able to maintain that as a system throughout their tenure. So I don't know if Fallen's looked back at that and actually tried to develop another concept of in-game leading for this team. Because before, that Furia that was a threat, the one that where we saw that explosive rifling from players like Art, they actually had a very clear characterization. And now it just feels like there is no identity. You don't know how to. I don't even know how to feel about this Furia team. And then when we went to Cologne, you know, K Serrato, supposed to be like the best rifler on this team, actually probably had, I mean, another one of these events where he just finds little to no impact. And that was why people were calling for Art's head. They're like, how can you let somebody like K Serrato go to waste? Well, your first chance to show what Fallen can do, also, it seems like K Serrato has gone to waste.
Yeah, this roster's match history is so tragic. Their last best of 3 victory coming over the mighty titans of Nouns.
Nice.
That's as good as it gets. And even if you go further back, you then have to go all the way back till April, where at IEM Rio, surely with no home crowd advantage, they managed to beat FaZe 2-0. But otherwise, it's just every best 3's a loss. So many best of 1 losses as well. They just can't seem to get anything going. Their classic mode, you know, before a lot of events, they like to come to Europe and disappoint everyone by crashing out of the playoffs of like some low-level cup. This time they lost to 500. That's 500 without their good players. It's dire, but this is the event. I've picked them.
Okay.
You know how it is. This is the event. I believe that it comes together. If it doesn't come together, this event, we remove them from ever being available to be picked at all. Just never picked again. We're not allowed to talk about them on the show. Furia no longer exist. I've decided. Okay. It seems a bit petulant and all or nothing, but I don't care. I've invented this rule, and I'm going to stick with it. Screw these guys if they don't come through. This one time. Just need one good event. Then you can go back to check stealing and doing nothing. That's fine. Just need one good event. But okay, seeing as we kind of ended on this, what should have been a dark horse pick, but that I casually promoted, having no better idea, let's talk about some dark horses.
All right.
I'll let you go first again. And you made a big decision.
Hell, I mean, I have stuck. Okay, first off, I picked 4 teams out of Group B. I won't apologize. 3 favorites, 1 underdog. Big are my underdog in this. That's my first pick. And listen, I know we kind of spoiled it earlier on. My problem is with this big team is I like the academy players. I like them promoting it just to get into Cologne, I think is a little bit cheeky, a bit scummy, even perhaps. But I do like players like Sin. Process, I think, is kind of grown on me more. And I think Crimbo is actually a very solid piece. I'm still iffy about what I expect out of Monte on this team. But I don't know. I have them as an underdog. I'm not trying to make a massive argument that they're sort of guaranteed to get out of groups. I just think that they are well drilled enough, and I think the main advantage that Big have is their prep work is exceptional. They're probably the pinnacle of just good prep on like how to utilize utility on T sides, how to sort of structure a nice flow chart of ideas. Everybody should be up to speed, especially when they're up against a team they know they're going to end up playing. Like that first round of games in the group, they're going to come in prepared for that game. So, in essence, I think Big have at least some chance. I think it's when you get thrown into like these random circuits where it's like, oh, you're playing 2 best of 3s in the same day, and you don't know who you're going to be playing in the next round. That's where Big, I think, really struggle.
Yeah, it's why they really need those like invites, partnerships, that sort of stuff, because I don't think they'd have any success if they had to do the tier 2 grind. Like, let's be honest. Yeah. Without prep time, Big are hopeless. But they've had lots of time to prep this game. They've also had some good like actual series victories in the past at big events. Like they beat I was just looking at this a second ago. Yeah, at the Blast Premier 4 groups, sure, in July, and we all know that event's basically one big training session for everyone. Mm-hmm. They were able to beat Astralis. Like they were able to beat a team that we consider to be pretty much locks to make it out of groups. There's a chance they make it out. It's not a ridiculous idea. I just think the roster looks a bit wild. Like, Sin is currently, if I'm not mistaken, calling, which I was not expecting. Process, I liked him on the academy roster. I still think he's going to be one of the better players here. But is he ready? It's always the question when you promote an academy kid. Like, how good was your academy at making the most of the players? And Tabson, it's a bit late now to go, oh, Tabson, you're really skilled and we've been wasting you as an IGL. Now, 2023, the prime of your career is now is when we're going to do it. Like, come on, really? Now's when you have this idea? It feels a bit... You should have just left him as the IGL, man. Like, it's too late. We've been calling for this for years. Why now? And then Mantu is so underwhelmingly mid, isn't he? He's just mid.
It is funny you bring that up as well, because Tabson, one of the main reasons he stuck with Big is that he wanted to continue developing the German scene, and then they bring in Monte, which
the Polish Brit.
Yeah. Which is... Yeah. I'm pretty sure Monte does speak German, so it's fine. But it's also just like, are we really continuing to develop? You know, now the academy team doesn't even exist, as far as I can tell. So
yeah, there's all these other German players playing in teams like Alternate Attacks, and I know they're all terrible, but they're German. Like, y'all can try.
So I don't know.
Red, that guy, he exists. There's an AWPer that gets like mad numbers in Tier 2, who everyone calls like the ultimate Tier 2 AWP abuser. I can't remember his name at this point. But yeah, there's guys. There's Germans out there. You didn't have to sign Mantu, but clearly they thought he's the best available German speaker. Just a shame it's Mantu. I've struggled to enjoy watching him play when he was on OG. I thought he wasn't that great on that team. He hasn't looked very good here yet. All in all, the team reeks of mid. Maybe that's enough to make it out of this group. And I've said I don't think it's a bad pick, so we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah.
But it's a rough one to talk about. It's a rough one to really hype up.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. Right. Oh, camera's gone.
That's why I apologized. I forgot.
Oh,
I unplugged the cable that keeps this thing charged.
Oh, right.
So,
I thought it was you punching the mic you were apologizing for. I was like, oh, it wasn't that bad. But no, okay. That made sense. Yeah, just
before we fully move away from Big, yeah, Sin, I do think you're right. He is in-game leading, but I imagine it's like a soft transition. You know, I don't think that has fully happened yet. So,
either way,
maybe it's, you know, maybe it'll just be a duality, like I'm struggling to find a solution. Tabson, please help.
Dad,
help me with my homework, please.
Okay, so moving on to my first underdog pick, I've gone with one who are, it feels like it's a bit. Speaking of a bit too late, Movistar. This new look roster that they're bringing into this event, which hasn't actually played that much together, I think has a little bit of potential. A little bit. It's a hard sell to most people. Like guys like Adams or Adam S, who most people have never heard of. I mean, I've watched him play in Romanian teams. I know he's got a little something to him, a little bit of skill. And then Martinez has kind of looked like, he's the Sunpice replacement, but isn't as good. I still think there's a lot of potential there as well. So having brought in Just, who always looked very solid on those Portuguese teams, never a massive fragger, but like a solid piece of the most successful ones, the ones that actually made it through big qualifiers, actually qualified to big events. I think it's a decent idea. I think, what's his name? David G, right, wasn't going to win you events, right? He wasn't a big determining factor. So taking a risk on Just, who's slightly older, but also has been a part of semi-successful rosters, at least by the standards of Iberian CS, I think is a worthy attempt. So it's a risk. You're asking a lot of Mopoz and Alex, really, Alex to call a great game, prep the players properly, because that's really when they've had their success. They've been hyper-prepped, like kind of in a big sort of way, and then they've actually come out and Mopoz has delivered all those openings they needed. That was the key to this team actually having success. They've still got those pieces. They've got some nice additions. I think there's a chance they make a run. It's not something I'd put money on, obviously. Even in this group, they seem like a bit of a long shot. But I just like what they've done. And I think at least they're worth mentioning in this sort of context.
Yeah, I think as well, you know, Adam S, I think, has played within, like you said, Iberian teams for quite some time before, and actually was a part of that Iberian family squad where Sampaius was first kind of discovered and brought into Movistar.
Yeah,
Adam
a while
S,
ago, wasn't it? Yeah.
yeah, I think also was an in-game leader at the time for that team and was playing with. So it was, I think, Davy G, Deaths, Sampius, Adam S, and somebody else. I don't remember.
I just looked it up. It's the other Slacks. You know, there's a Slacks that's a German AWP that's very mid.
Even then,
he's the other Slacks.
Yeah, I don't even know who you're talking about. And I actually casted some of those games, so I apologize to Slacks. But yeah, Adam S, I think, was the in-game leader at the time for that team. So, and I think his strength actually was more mid-rounding because they didn't actually do like crazy strats on this Iberian family team. They were just kind of a mix. But they actually did some really nice rotations in mid-rounds on their T sides. So maybe that's even just a way in which they're trying to balance in-game leading responsibilities for... It's Alex calling on this team, right?
Yeah, Alex is the main IGL. I don't know if this guy's going to be calling on this roster. I mean, the last team I saw him on was Nexus with BTN. You know, he definitely wasn't calling on that team. So I don't know. Maybe they have brought him in.
Yeah, but I think...
Smart.
I think just more of like a secondary calling situation, you know, where like Alex will call the actual strats and then... Adam, I guess, kind of handles the micromanagement of what they should do in the mid round. That's how I'd like to fantasize about this roster because it's the only way I can really think about thinking this team has some kind of tactical prowess outside of just being able to shoot heads decently.
Yeah, they have outperformed their status in the past, thanks primarily to two players who are still on the team. Well, primarily. There was also the Sunpies being really good on CT side part of it, but their entire T side was structured around Mopos getting openings, and they were really good at prepping those and executing them. So if that's still functioning,
yeah,
they got a shot.
I don't hate it. I don't like it, but there's not a lot that you can pick from.
These groups, right?
Yeah, there's not a lot you can pick from in Group A. So what can you do? And in that vein, I've decided to go completely left field and I don't even know if this is really justifiable from from any sort of logical standpoint. I've chosen Grayhound as one of my underdogs. Now, they did do quite well in the last season of ESL Pro League that they were in. I'm just thinking about it now. I am kind of struggling to remember who they beat. They did find themselves in a position where they could have actually made it out of the group, and I think they lost to Pain in the last round in like a 2-1 series.
Sounds familiar.
That's like the main thing I remember. I think they beat like 0-0 Nation. I think Astralis or something. There was
beat NIP.
NIP, right? That's the one with Alexi B on it, which people still like Alexi B, but Grayhound beat them, so haha. There are some people on this team that I think are relatively compelling. I think the problem is finding consistency. I think Vexite is kind of the main problem. I remember, I think we actually spoke to him at the Asia RMR. We brought him on for like a little interview thing. And that was like his best tournament, you know, playing against Asian teams. He actually was just like dominating him and ENCE.
Tore him up, yeah.
And ENCE is actually the key man on this roster, but I think Vexite actually does have it in him. He actually had like a very mature response about how he's seen as inconsistent. It's just like sometimes that's how it goes. He doesn't even think about it. And there was nothing in the way that and the way that he presented it to me, I actually kind of believed him. You know, there was no sort of fake bravado about it. It was just, you just take every game as it comes. And I like that he has a good mentality at a young age, and I think he actually does have the mechanical skill for it. I don't hate this Grayhound roster, and I think they're probably understocked just because they don't have as many opportunities to actually show what they can do. So I just have them as kind of like a weird, not even a dark horse, like a dark pony in the corner. Maybe they can surprise, especially in a weaker group. Yeah, maybe.
Honestly, they're a team I have in the past relished in roasting. Like, absolutely. Just tearing them apart, never picking them, saying they're always my 0-3 pick.
Right.
The last 6 months or so, I have softened up massively. Mostly because they have shown a little more fight. They've shown that they can, you know, do like everyone else does and kind of dispatch of the bad teams at times. Like, sure, they then lost to 0-0 Nation in that like lower bracket play-in, because they lost to Pain, right, to go to the lower bracket last chance thing. And there they lost to 0-0 Nation 2-1, and that was disappointing for them. That's, you know, when you want to establish yourself as that slight step above just the shitters who get crushed at ESL Pro League, you want to be beating that team. But they showed way more fight at that event. And Vexite, I think you're entirely right on. For them to take that next step is kind of on him. I said a while ago, a long time ago, he was the next, in theory, star that Australia had to like build up on, or Australasia had to build on, try and hope to integrate into a team and find consistency with. And we're seeing it here. If they have that consistent guy of X, like finding massive openings, huge impact on his deagle, like he's already had some rounds that shown he can do it. Yeah, they really take that next step. Sure, they maybe don't play the most beautiful Counter-Strike at times, and there's some questions about the depth. But just a couple really good players, good chemistry, and the right vibe is enough to make you good enough to compete in these groups. You know, to make a good chance, like a good shot at the last chance bracket, to have another competitive run, and maybe show off that you are better than a team like see who else in the group they would like to beat. Put up a good fight against Gamer Legion. Smash Orcs if you get the chance. When you play Orcs, smash them. Don't let me peddle my tier 2 EU is the second best region in the world. Like,
beat NIP again.
Yeah, exactly. Beat NIP again. Take advantage of these opportunities. I think with Vexite actually performing, they look way more threatening to do that. And if he can find that consistency, yeah, you're right. That team does take a massive step up. So, as much as I've roasted them in the past, I will admit, not as terrible a pick as it used to be. Grayhound, fairly competitive now. Now on to my next pick. Was it during the just spoiler, we did have to redo the intro 3 times for various reasons. Not sure if this is the actual one where I talked about Monte having replacements, but it's going to come up in this organically anyway. Because I picked Monte as my underdog, my second one. And it's weird to pick them after they replace Boros. Well, they lost Boros, really. He was always going to get poached. The fact that he got poached by Falcons was the biggest twist of 2023, in my opinion, of all the teams. That came out of left field for me. But the fact that they replaced him with Bro has been not actually that bad of an idea. Because Bro, to me, he was never outstanding on any of the rosters that he actually played on, like Astralis Talent, and then a bunch of unheard of Danish teams I'm not going to bother listing off. But I wasn't expecting it to kind of work, and it has. Like, you've needed more from other players, because Boros carried one hell of a heavy burden. Like, not only was he taking 30 to 35% of opening frags, he was winning the majority of those fights, and then also he was your primary source of like rifle play, like consistently round by round. If Boros isn't getting a multi-kill, your odds of winning that round were down the shitter. So Bro's not actually been that bad. Woro's taken a step up in his own play now that it feels like he's gotten really comfortable with his own play surrounding like the other roles on the team. And then we've seen some more consistency from Demq and things like that. So Monte looked better than I expected after losing such an impactful player. I think there's a good chance they can put up a fight in Group B. I expect them to beat teams like Rooster, MIBR, Evil Geniuses. These are all teams they should be beating, considering their status in Tier 2 EU. Like, they are a pretty solid roster. And I think in that opening game against Big, they will not be the most prepped team. They won't have out-prepped Big. But there's a good chance they outshoot them. We know these teams can do that. So I'm interested to see what comes of them. I'm not feeling overwhelmingly confident in them. But I think they'll be an interesting team to follow. And yeah, they could potentially create a bit of an upset, considering they are better than, I almost guarantee, 3 of the teams in this group.
Yeah, no, I think that's all fine. I don't really hate it. I think the idea that as well that SDY took over in-game leading responsibilities, because that was once on Waro to do.
It used to be, yeah.
Yeah, so the fact that losing Boros and Waro actually just kind of gets to play his own game to a certain degree, because I think what would happen before with Monte is that Boros would fail his frags. They'd lose like 2 duels across the map, and then Waro would be like, okay, it's my turn. And, they almost take like Gladiator's rules about it. And he would end up finding like 3 kills on the AWP, and we're just like, why didn't we start with this? So I don't know if that I would put them much further than groups. That is for sure.
Yeah, it's tough.
But I've always been a fan of Demq. I liked him a long time ago on that. What was it? Crazy, I think.
Yeah, the cheats. I mean, alleged cheating rosters. That he happened to be on.
Well, I think wasn't Demq on. I swear he was either on like Navi Junior or was it just Crazy? I think it was just Crazy. Yeah, Crazy Project X. I didn't. The Akuma thing we'll skirt past. But he actually was like a very stable rifler on those teams, and I actually thought he was going to get poached at one point or another. and then that whole drama happened, and that was never going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of up on him. I think Waro as well. I kind of like his revenge arc. Just him and Simple and just have beef.
That endless beef, yeah.
Yeah, just have random beef.
Basically, massive arsehole 1 and massive arsehole 2 locking horns, from what I understand of the dynamics of both players behind the scenes. But yeah, also, it is interesting, yeah.
I think, if I'm not wrong, Krasnal, the last time Ago made it to Pro League, I think Krasnal got kicked before they played at Pro League. I might have that wrong.
I'd have to check on that.
Let me check. Season 15 was the last time Ago were in Pro League, and Krasnal was playing with them. Yeah, he didn't make it to Pro League.
He got dropped in March 2022.
Yeah, and they played that Pro League in April 2022.
So yeah, it was pretty much right before it.
Yeah, because I think I remember having this interview with him where he was like, "Oh yeah, I mean, it would be great to make it to Pro League because I've never actually played in Pro League yet, even though I was on that Ago roster." It was why he actually so it was actually the reason why he joined international rosters instead of staying with the Polish scene, is that he felt so betrayed by that encounter that he was like, I tried to make it work with you guys, and now I'm just going to abandon you. And I'm kind of here for it. The fact that he's getting a chance to play in a Pro League like this. It's not even that I think, Krasnal is one of the best players on this team. It's just, I'm kind of happy for him that he's been able to make it. So, good for him.
Yeah, he's not untalented, but it's always been a weird one for me, is figuring out what his role is, what he's actually good at. So certain teams where he played like the real hyper-aggressive type, like he had similar stat distributions to a player like Fessor, who was also on this team at some point, which was always fun. But yeah, it was always rough for me to figure out what he's good at, and he's kind of become a sort of glue guy, I guess, on this roster. It's odd, but he's found some sort of place, and that's good. And this team seems to make decent use of him surrounding these sorts of more starring pieces. So we wish him the best as a team. Hopefully he gets to play AGO one day and on a LAN and talk shit. That'd be fun.
Well, I mean, AGO just they're not even like a relevant Polish team anymore.
They've dropped their roster, so
yeah. Well, there you go.
We'll see how that goes. But right, yeah, this is your final underdog. Yeah, we're starting to get towards the end of this slightly.
It might have been shitting on Gamer Legion earlier on, but I've gone ahead and picked them. And here's the reason why. Sorry, let me just scroll through my notes here. Why did I pick this team?
You made notes?
Struggling. Nealon as an in-game leader. I don't know that I really like it on this Gamer Legion roster. I think we're definitely seeing some of the shortcomings and maybe even the propping up of Shui as an in-game leader on this Gamer Legion team. Obviously, the fact they made it to the finals of the major in Paris. Very cool, very fun. People were excited. Underdog stories are nice. Basically gave vitality to the major. But I do think that Acor and Volt, I'm a big fan of both of those players individually. I think not only for the fact that Volt is a UK player and he'd been with the scene for a while, but I also think he just plays like a very stable, solid game. And I always said this when Acor was getting completely hounded on when he was on MOUZ. I thought he was being given a poor hand, given that he came into that roster under false expectations. Everyone just kind of dismissed him. I'm kind of here for the redemption arc. Gamer Legion surprised even at the Rio Major before this year. I guess before this year is kind of a stupid... At the Rio Major, they surprised even getting to that stage, and then they were able to make it to the finals in the follow-up major as well. So it might just be that they need that added, grandeur of a tournament. ESL Pro League might not have that because it's not only is the broadcast like a super chill, relaxed vibe where all players come over to the couch, let's have a little chat, and we're gonna have Nerf guns shooting you or something. Maybe that's not the environment in which these guys will thrive. But I think they have the capacity to win. As much as their online results are usually pretty all over the place.
Yeah.
When they get to a LAN, online. I actually think they're better. So.
Okay. It does. I do sometimes get the vibe that like Isaac is a LAN player, because online I struggled to find, like, if I pieced together his 30 best rounds, I maybe got to 20 kills. Like, it was rough online for years with that guy. Then on LAN, he's been at times really damn good, and that's just
Mm-hmm.
confused me to all hell about this roster. Like, who the hell even is this guy at this point? Like, is he good? Is he bad? We'll never know. But yeah, maybe that point stands that the Nickelodeon Pro League isn't the place they're going to thrive. Like, with the gas, the goofs, and the tracksuits. Like, it might not be for them. Well, they're just a tough team to predict, I think, right now. I agree, Neelan does nothing for me. There's a reason K23 didn't want him calling at one point. They brought in a Dren, just in his out of retirement almost, to take over for him. And he went to Evil Geniuses, and that was... Can't really give him any blame for how terrible that roster was. Like, it was just a terrible roster. But all in all, I feel real mixed about it. Yeah. If they come into this event, show a similar level they had even with Shuei and IM, like as in they actually make some kind of a run, fair enough. We've been underrating the hell out of their coach, out of Isaac, out of Kioz. Even we've been giving them all too much shit. I doubt that will happen. I think they're going to get eliminated from the groups. But there's still the slight chance.
Yeah. I mean, I had to pick at least one more underdog, so they're who I've gone with.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same about my last pick. They are a team who play Counter-Strike. And as much as I love certain aspects of this roster, I can't feel confident about MIBR in any real way. Like, BR Nazan and Insani are clearly hyper-talented who need to be, honestly, playing European Counter-Strike as much as possible, getting developed by a great coach and a great IGL, and then eventually promoted to carry Brazilian CS in CS2. They're the future of that scene. They look insanely good. But this is a roster that took Furia scraps and turned it into a team that's lost multiple times to Evil Genius rosters, which terrifies me. Because if you're capable of losing to EG Black, who are you capable of beating in the big European event? Now, they did play some CCT online finals. They came over. They beat Bad News Eagles and Anonymo. So at least they're better than Tier 2 EU with some consistency. Like, they can actually do that. They're not a Furia roster. But I do feel like this team will make it out of this group if, a big if, Safe, Brunau, I think you're supposed to pronounce him instead of BRNazan, and Insani play their theoretical best, and the system somehow just functions. Then they'll make it out of groups. Otherwise, yeah, they're just going to go out, and that's fine. They're not really expected to do a whole lot more.
Yeah, I actually thought when they got Drop and Safe that it was surprisingly a good fit for this team. Because Insani and BRNazan, Breno, I don't know what you want to call them. I think he has said BRNazan is the right way. His real name is Breno, and his first few letters of his alias are BRN. So I mean, Breno just is easier for human beings.
Everyone, yeah.
Those two, I do agree that they're very high prospective players, and then they bring in an AWP because I think Brenazan, God, I hate his name. Actually came into this roster initially and was AWPing, even though he wasn't an AWPer before. And that was because I think they pulled from my recollection. He was on the academy team for MIBR. And he wasn't the AWPer there, but he came into the main roster, but they didn't have an AWPer at the time, and so Breno was AWPing for a period. Maybe I'm misremembering, but maybe not AWPing, in-game leading? I think he was... No, he's definitely AWPing. He's definitely AWPing. Anyway, now they have Safe, actually a dependable hand. I like Safe as an AWPer. I always felt like he was used the wrong way on Furia as well. And then you've got Drop as like a very solid anchor player. So I didn't think the roles were an issue, but
no.
Yeah, I have the same fear. I didn't even realize that they'd lost to EG recently. These aren't on at times where I'm able to sort of watch that, and that is a little sad and a little concerning. But
it is.
I'm not down on them. I think that team is actually a pretty solid pick, all in all.
There's explosive guys. It's just it's exit calling. I've not seen a whole lot of structure and innovation or just nice ideas from them when they play. It's mostly win heads-up fights. And they've got the players to do it, but I feel like, you're really rolling the dice if you're calling them to actually go win something. And so I am taking that dice roll, because my other options were Rooster and Evil Geniuses, pretty much, which I don't know how strong the beams are in this house, so I don't really want to pick those. So I just went with it, and as much as I have just said that's all very worrying, all this stuff, I'm still going to enjoy watching Insani play. Let's be honest. If you can't enjoy an Insani demo, what are you, a Valorant fan? Like, stop watching CS. Like, it's just not for you. He plays really gorgeous looking Counter-Strike that when it peaks, mind-blowing. So I'm going to have fun watching them at this event. I'm going to root for them, obviously, as I pick them. I always do. But I feel like they're one of the rougher picks I've had to make. Just a roster that doesn't feel polished and quite ready.
Yeah, that's what some of the opportunity is for these guys. So I don't hate it. I think those are all of our picks. At the very least, we've been able to scramble something together. So hopefully some of them actually work out. I
think our favourites are going to be good. The two favourites from each group that we actually like are going to be good. So we've each made a favourite pick that's a bit iffy. I think MOUZ will go through. I think Furia's we'll see. We'll see about Furia. Oh, God. We hope for the best, but okay. Right, that's going to be it. Just clocking over an hour, not too bad. Thanks to anyone who watched this far. If you did, bloody hell, I owe you a pint, because I know I struggle to make it through an hour of a good podcast. Attention spans these days. Anyway, so if you want to see more, leave a like. There's going to be a Group C and D preview if we don't, get sucked into a black hole next week. No spoilers. But yeah, that's all for this one. Goodbye.